My investigation led me to a transcript of the IRS. So we just felt like that was too close to the federal government to be done in that fashion without the federal government knowing full well and having plans of its own for the Contras and the use of that mine sweep in connection with the Contras.
When the jurors were done listening to him, some of them even wanted to reverse their verdict.
We started the penalty phase like 3 o'clock in the evening, and we knocked off about 6:30, I think. And during that time, I presented government in its three-piece suits and ties to the jury. And that presentation with 3 government witnesses was so powerful that the next morning when we came to court, the judge called us into his chambers and said he had 2 notes from 2 different jurors wanting to change their verdict on the guilt phase to not guilty.
Who were these government witnesses that came forward to talk about Barry Seal?
One of them was Lieutenant Thompson of the state police, describing how the government complicity in with Barry Seals, and when he caught Barry Seals red-handed after all of this, after Barry Seals had been sentenced in Florida, and he caught Barry Seals still smuggling, caught him red-handed at the dock, and the DEA and the CIA showed up and told the state police to butt out and took over the operation.
So a wily old New Orleans lawyer pierced a massive government conspiracy to smuggle drugs into this country.
Barry Seals wasn't told to cooperate with the DEA officer. The DEA officer was told to cooperate with Barry Seals. And if you'll read that IRS transcript, you'll realize that he was running the DEA operation in Miami, Florida. He was flying out of Florida with DEA money, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, of which the DEA has never accounted for. Nobody knows what happened to it. And he was flying that money out on his own, with his own airplane, and doing his own thing at all these times.
Barry Seal was not just a casual part of our nation's covert intelligence. He was right underneath Oliver North. He helped direct it.
When government involves itself in activities like the CIA and start subverting natural events and the natural course of history, that's where government itself becomes the criminal.
If you had the job of hiding every General Motors factory and every Chevrolet dealership and General Motors dealership in the country, could you hide all of that? Unless it was in plain sight?
Of course not.
So this whole thing is hiding in plain sight, isn't it?
Yeah, sure it is. Absolutely. If you want to, I'll tell you something else. You want a scandal in this country? Investigate retired DEA agents. Investigate their net worth and put it all together. If the American people don't make its government start behaving soon, we're going to reach the point of no return.
There's only one conclusion. If Barry Seal is working for the CIA, then the CIA is controlling the drug trade. Did you ever in your wildest dreams in law school think that you might entertain the idea that the United States government smuggled drugs?
Absolutely not.
Take Dan Harmon. He worked for the government for a long time in Arkansas.
Well, after 15 hours of deliberations, a federal jury found the former 7th district prosecutor guilty on 5 of 11 felony charges.
After 2 days of deliberations, the jury found Harmon guilty of 5 of 11 counts, guilty of drug charges, racketeering, and extortion.
The people that were actually involved in the murders have received protection. The people who have been involved in protecting them have received promotions. Not only have they not been indicted for those murders, they have been protected all around for any other criminal activity. Prime example, Dan Harmon.
So Dan Harmon is a drug thug, but a local one. Still, think of the things he got away with.
Dan Harmon stood accused of stealing drugs from his drug task force, putting them back on the street, and cutting deals with drug suspects for money and sexual favors. At the end of his trial, he left the federal courthouse guilty on 5 of 11 charges, the most serious racketeering. The name Dan Harmon first came to light in 1988. Harmon was a county prosecutor taking on one of the biggest murder cases in the state's history. The deaths of Kevin Ives and Don Henry, two teenagers found dead on a railroad track in Saline County. Harmon resurfaced 3 years later when he was slapped with 4 federal charges for tax evasion. Harmon was subsequently thrown in jail for refusing to take a drug test. After 19 days behind bars and an appeals court hearing, he was freed from his first stint behind bars. His freedom continued until July of 1992, when Harmon was found guilty of not filing a tax return for 1988. He was then fined $25 and sentenced to 2 weeks home detention. Harmon hit headlines once again when 4 bricks of fake cocaine were found in his ex-wife's apartment. The bricks were evidence belonging to Harmon's 7th District Drug Task Force. 3 months later, Harmon's ex-wife, Holly Duvall, accused him of kidnapping and assaulting her. He was jailed again, and this time refused to leave in the hope of getting a speedy trial. It was during this time period he began a hunger strike in jail, underwent a psychiatric evaluation, and even shaved his head. Throughout this time in the spotlight, Harmon often criticized the media and even hit an Arkansas Democrat Gazette reporter. Later that month, he negotiated a plea arrangement. Several of his charges, from kidnapping to disorderly conduct, were reduced in exchange for his resignation from office. That day came in July of 1996, as Dan Harmon cleared his office and moved to the Gulf.
Listen to Dan Harmon talk about his conviction and let your mind roam. Who do you think Dan Harmon reported to?
Every one of those counts that they convicted me of extortion of, every bit of that money went to where it was supposed to go.
But Dan Harmon hasn't been charged with the capital crime of murder for the train deaths. Could it be because he belonged to a drug distribution organization that is integrated vertically just like General Motors? Remember the map we showed you earlier? Remember the simultaneity of events?
I believe that it began with the CIA smuggling drugs in and out of Mena through Barry Seal's operation. So whoever was giving the commands through the CIA, and possibly just CIA operatives rather than an official CIA investigation, might be who is responsible.
They must be protecting someone really important to have occasioned such a massive cover-up.
I have not talked about it before.
Well, I mean, but everyone else has.
I'm not the one to answer the question about Oliver North's involvement in smuggling drugs in the Iran-Contra affair. Again, sticking to the facts, I know that when Oliver North was before Congress in the congressional hearings of the Iran-Contra affair, 2 questions came up about Mena, Arkansas, and the investigation went into closed-door sessions. Now, if Oliver North had not been involved in Mena, then why did he simply say, I don't know anything about Mena? Why did the committee go into closed-door session? That's a fact that cannot be ignored.
If Oliver North had not been involved in Mena, there would not have been a Mena, would there?
That's a reasonable assumption. That is certainly a reasonable assumption that I would have to agree with. Barry Seal was conducting his drug smuggling operation long before Oliver North got involved.
Was Barry Seal a big enough drug smuggler to have conducted a drug smuggling operation with the regularity to provoke citizen complaints about low-flying aircraft?
Probably not. And in fact, now that you say that, it wasn't until the time frame after Oliver North got involved in Mena that there was so much drug activity over the tracks.
So does it seem possible at all to you that if Oliver North had not been charged with flying guns down to the Contras illegally and bringing back cocaine that could be then sold to be used to finance the Contra war, those two boys might be alive today?
Seems apparent that they would be.